A dead man just gave his son homework. That's the sentence I never expected to type about a horror show, but here we are. Jim Mathews died at the end of Season 3. Bled out, buried, grieved, and then, 2 episodes into Season 4, he's sitting on a log outside the family RV like he just stepped out for a smoke break. If you're new to From, welcome to the single most frustrating puzzle box on television, and I mean that as a compliment. If you've been watching since Season 1, you already know why this scene matters more than it looks like it should. Because From doesn't waste screen time. Every crayon drawing, every dream, every offhand line from Episode 2 is a loaded gun that goes off 3 seasons later. Today we're breaking down Jim's return, what the Lake of Tears actually is, why it's been hiding in plain sight since the pilot episode, and a theory involving Greek mythology that might explain the entire geography of this town. Stick around, because the last section connects a detail almost nobody's talking about yet that lets set the scene properly. Ethan slips away from the house without telling Donna. He heads for the RV, the same one his family arrived in, still flipped on its side from the crash years ago. He's trying to grab the radio to send a message. Instead, he finds his dead father sitting there like it's any other Tuesday. No dramatic entrance. No glowing light. Jim just looks up, and honestly, he looks a little startled to see Ethan at all. That detail is going to matter in about 4 minutes, so file it away. What follows is quiet. Jim doesn't deliver exposition. He comforts his son. He tells him he's proud of him. It plays like the goodbye Jim never got to have, and for Ethan, grieving and exhausted, it clearly lands as real, whether or not the audience is supposed to trust it. Then Jim shifts gears. He tells Ethan there's something important he needs to do. Find the Lake of Tears. Ethan asks the obvious question. Why can't we look for it together? And before Jim can answer, Tabitha shows up, and Jim is just gone. No fade out, no monster attack, just absence. That non-answer is the whole engine of this episode. From Love's handing you a mystery and yanking it away half a second before the payoff, that here's where casual viewers miss the pattern. This isn't the first time someone dead has shown up to have a heart-to-heart with the living. Boyd has seen Father Catry more than once, including a moment where the priest talked him down from torturing Elgin. Tom, the old bartender, appeared to Jade at a point when she badly needed direction, and it worked. In every one of these cases, the deceased character shows up calm, focused, and clearly trying to help. Compare that to how the Township's actual monsters operate. The nocturnal creatures don't offer comfort. The man in yellow doesn't offer comfort. Whatever these ghost-like appearances are, they behave like something separate from the town's cruelty, almost like they're working against it rather than for it. That context matters, because it tells us how to read Jim's scene. This wasn't a trick dressed up to look kind. If the show wanted to torment Ethan, it had 1,000 crueler ways to do it. Instead, we got warmth. That's not the Township style. But here's the wrinkle that made me sit up. Jim wasn't behaving like Father Catry or Tom. He kept glancing over his shoulder during the entire conversation, like he was worried about being caught. And that initial surprise at seeing Ethan? That's not the reaction of an all-knowing spirit guide. That's the reaction of someone who didn't expect a visitor. Put those two things together, and you get an unsettling possibility. Jim isn't watching over Ethan from somewhere safe. He might be stuck, tethered to that RV, hiding from something, using the one window he has to pass along a message before whatever he's avoiding finds him. If that's true, this wasn't a farewell. It was a warning delivered under a time limit. Now let's go back. Way back. Season 1, Episode 2. Before any of us knew what Township even meant, Ethan has a seizure the night his family arrives in town. When he wakes up, he tells Jim about a dream. A lake, made of crayon drawings on a wall, with his whole family standing inside them. Then a spider drops from the ceiling, and someone screams. At the time, this read as flavor text. Creepy kid dream, sure, spooky show, moving on. There was no reason to think it mattered. Especially once those same crayon drawings got reassigned to Victor a few episodes later as his way of processing what he was living through. Here's the detail that actually snapped this into focus for me while researching this video, and it's easy to miss even on a rewatch. In the pilot episode, before any of this, Julie is playing with 2 finger puppets, a red monster and a yellow one, acting out a tiny bedtime story. In that story, the secret fairies are on their way back from the Lake of Tears to save the day. The yellow monster dies anyway. Ethan is upset. Nobody thinks twice about it. That means the Lake of Tears was named, out loud, in the literal first episode of the show, wrapped inside a child's game about fairies who show up too late to save someone. 3.5 seasons later, a dead father tells his son to go find that exact place. From doesn't do coincidences. It does long fuses. And there's a physical clue buried in Victor's actual drawing that theorists have zeroed in on. It shows something like a bowl half filled with water, with a spider perched near the opening. Combine that with Ethan's dream detail about a spider dropping from a ceiling, and you get a strong hint that this lake isn't out in the open air at all. It might be enclosed, underground, a cave system, a chamber beneath the town, something with an actual ceiling above the water. If the Lake of Tears turns out to be underground, that reframes the entire search. Every theory up to now has assumed the answers to this town are hidden somewhere out in the forest. This flips that. The forest might just be the lobby. The real answer could be beneath everyone's feet the whole time. Season 4 has quietly been building a rule about seizures, and once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Ethan's very first vision of the lake came from a seizure. Fast forward, and after the priest arrives with Sophia, Marielle notes offhand that seizures aren't uncommon for people in this town. Separately, Julie's time travel ability has been directly tied to seizure-like episodes of her own. Line those up, and a pattern appears. This isn't random neurology. It looks like the Township uses seizures as a kind of on-ramp, a doorway between whatever normal reality is and whatever the town actually is underneath. Different characters get different visions through that doorway, but the doorway itself seems to be the same mechanism. If that's the rule, Ethan's dream wasn't a nightmare his brain cooked up from stress. It was a transmission. The town, or something inside it, showed him the Lake of Tears years before anyone thought to look for it, using the one method it apparently has for talking directly to a person's mind. Now for the part of this video where things get genuinely wild, because there's a reading of this show that reframes everything, and it comes from an unexpected place, Greek mythology. Ethan actually brought a fantasy novel with him to the Township called Flight of the Chromnacle, and the Lake of Tears shows up as a location inside that book too. That alone is a strange detail, but zoom out further, and the shape of the theory becomes hard to ignore. In Greek myth, the border between the living and the dead is a river, sometimes called the Styx, sometimes the Acheron, and a ferryman named Charon carries souls across it before judgment. A boundary between life and death. A crossing point. A body of water that souls have to pass through to move on. Sound familiar? If the Township is functioning like a kind of purgatory, a waiting room between living and whatever comes after, then a Lake of Tears is exactly the kind of landmark you'd expect that world to have. Not a literal lake for swimming. A threshold. Maybe even the thing that decides who gets to leave and who doesn't. That would also explain why a dead man is the one sending Ethan there. Who better to point toward the crossing than someone who's already made it partway across? Zoom out one more time, and notice who keeps colliding with the biggest mysteries in this show. Julie is testing the limits of her time jumping. Tabitha found the lighthouse, and that lighthouse turned out to be a genuine, if temporary, way out of the Township. Now Ethan has a direct assignment from a dead man to find the lake that started this entire arc. That's not spread evenly across the cast. That's one family sitting at the intersection of nearly every major thread this show has planted. And considering the Mathews family's arrival is literally how this series began, there's a real symmetry building here. If from is a story about a cycle, it tracks that the family who opened that cycle would be the one positioned to close it. The show even seems to be playing with this in real time. Season 4's 4th episode has Ethan and Tabitha actually stumbling onto a lake, though notably, nobody confirms it's the Lake of Tears Jim was talking about. Tabitha, for what it's worth, treats the whole search with a healthy dose of skepticism. That ambiguity feels deliberate, from Love's giving you almost the answer, then snatching it back, so the mystery survives another few episodes. One last thing worth untangling before we wrap up, because it changes how you should watch every future ghost scene in this show. From has multiple supernatural forces operating at once, and they are not all playing for the same team. The man in yellow is clearly antagonistic. The kimono woman manipulated Elgin into a trap that got Fatima locked in a cellar, and that entire storyline felt suffocating and wrong from the start. On the other side, you've got the boy in white, cryptic, mostly silent, but consistently steering people toward discoveries that help them. And the Angui children, revealed to be sacrificial victims tied to how the monsters sustain themselves, come across as tragic rather than threatening. The dead townspeople, Jim, Father Catry, Tom, slot cleanly into that second category. Helpful, unsettling, but never cruel. Once you separate the show's ghosts into helping and hunting, a lot of previously confusing scenes start making a lot more sense. So where does that leave us? A father's ghost, tethered and afraid, hands his son a decades-old riddle about a lake that might not even be above ground. A pattern of seizures that looks less like a symptom and more like a signal. A mythological framework that turns this whole town into a waiting room between life and whatever's next. And one family that keeps ending up exactly where the answers are hiding. From has spent 4 seasons burying its own instructions in plain sight. And this episode might be the clearest proof yet that the writers knew exactly where this story was headed from the very first hour. If you've got your own read on the Lake of Tears, drop it in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if this kind of deep dive is your thing, there's a subscribe button right about here that would make my week. I'll see you in the next one.